please join me in welcoming the one and only Anna Todd. You want to say hi to your fans?
Hi. Can we, while they're all excited, can I make a snap?
Absolutely. She wants to take a Snapchat video of you guys. Okay, can you put your books up in the air? Show them to Anna. Come on. Crazy energy. Welcome to the Philippines, Anna. This is the Philippines. We are so glad to have you with us this afternoon. Okay, we're gonna begin with a Q&A. We know you wanna get to know Anna a bit more. Okay, so you've always been vocal about wanting to come to the Philippines. How did you react when you found out that you were finally gonna get to come here?
Well, when I got the email, I wrote them back in like 30 seconds. So, and then afterward, it was probably like 2 weeks later, I was like, oh, I think I'm supposed to tell my publisher that I told them I would come. But I was so excited. I've been wanting to come for so long, and some of my friends from Wattpad have been here, and they absolutely loved it, and they always said, like, you have to go, you have to go. So I'm just excited to be here.
And we know that you interact with your fans a lot on social media. Before coming here, were you interacting with a lot of your Filipino fans online?
Yeah, some of them since like 2013.
That's
so
amazing.
yeah.
Are some of you here? Yeah. Awesome. Now, how has your stay been? You've done some interesting things. We know you've been stuck in traffic a few times.
Yeah.
But we heard about the new tattoo. Would you like to tell them about that?
Yeah. So me and my best friend, who's here with me, we always get tattoos together. I think this is like our third, something. And we were talking to your friend, actually.
Who also gets tattoos with me.
Yeah, and she said, if you guys are interested in getting a tattoo, we were like, oh yeah, we should totally get a tattoo. And then we went to go get a tattoo, and it was Friday night. It was pouring rain like crazy. And we were gonna walk, which I don't think I am supposed to be doing by myself, but I'm known for not listening to people. So we were going to walk, but then it was raining. So then we went to get an Uber, and it said it would be like 20 minutes. And we were like, what in the world? Why so much? Because traffic. And then a cab at the front desk, they were like, oh, it'll be like 30 minutes. And I was like, and our tattoo appointment was in like 30 minutes, but it was only a mile away. So we were like, it can't possibly take 30 minutes to get a mile, which is not true. So then we got in the hotel car, and we get there after an hour, and we're totally late, but the tattoo shop was really cool. And then we get out of the car, and I turn to her, and I'm like, oh, I forgot my wallet, which like wouldn't be so much of a problem if she didn't forget hers too. So we were like, okay, we don't have any money, and she doesn't have any phone service, and it's raining, and it's Friday night. And I'm like, I had this feeling, I'm like, are we gonna get in trouble? Like, what's gonna happen to us? So I'm like the more calm one. Like, she's calm too, but I'm like, I kept reminding her, like, this will be funny tomorrow, like, it's fine, even if we have to walk back. So I'm like, her tattoo is gonna take longer. Sorry, this takes a long time. This is why I write books, because I tell really long stories. So we go in there, and I'm like, well, you just start your tattoo, and I'll walk back and get the wallet. And she's like, no. So then I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll call JB, but I felt bad from the National Bookstore. I'm like, I feel bad telling him, like, oh, can you bring my wallet, like, to a tattoo shop on a Friday night? He's already been working so much. I'm like, I don't know what else to do, though. So he gets someone else, who's also on the front row, to bring my wallet from my room. And then we were fine, and she got to go to a tattoo shop for the first time in her life. So there's that. So thanks again. And I got the tattoo. So after that long spiel, I'll tell you what the tattoo is.
Yes,
so,
we want to know.
I don't know if anyone in here has read The Bronze Horseman by any chance. Yeah, so I love that book so much. And the guy in the book is named Alexander, but he has this nickname Shura, which they're in Russia, so it kind of explains it. And this is Shura in Russian.
That's beautiful.
So I got that. I was going to get
awesome.
2, but then we didn't have any money, so I was like, maybe I'll just get 1 and hope for the best.
Okay, you have to get the other one soon. You've been very active on social media. Do your fans influence your stories as they're written? I know they were influencing it when you were doing it on Wattpad, but now that you've been writing more.
Yeah, well, I'm still writing on Wattpad now, but that wasn't the original plan. Usually when you sign a book deal, you have to like follow the rules, but I didn't. So I was writing Nothing More, which is Landon's story. And so I felt like I'd known Landon, for 3 years now. So when I started writing it, I'm like, why doesn't this feel like I don't feel connected to him, even though in my mind I'm so connected to him, but I'm like, this story's like just kind of boring, or like, I don't know, I just didn't feel it at all. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like maybe after it was the only story I have, maybe like I don't have any other stories that I can write. But then I started sending chunks of it to my friends who started as after readers from Wattpad, but now they're like my closest friends. So I started sending them chunks and they were texting me their reaction, basically like if they were commenting on Wattpad. And then I wrote like 15,000 words in that one day.
Wow.
So then I was like, oh, that's what it is that I love that feedback. I love like it being a social experience. So then I went back to my publisher, who totally could have told me, like, no freaking way, you're not writing a story for free when we've already paid you to write it. So I asked my editor, do you think your boss, which my editor has always been like 1,000,000,000% on board with every crazy thing I do. So I knew he would have my back, but that doesn't mean that his boss or her boss would. Yeah. So it took like a few days, and I wrote this really long email saying like, you guys really trusted me in the beginning, like let's like keep trying new things together and all this stuff, and they let me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited. So I'm still writing on Wattpad, and the readers still influence the story. I love reading all the comments, even though I can't really respond to everyone, but I still read every single comment on Nothing More, Nothing Less. And it's just fun to like play with people's emotions.
Oh my God. You made me cry in so many places. It's horrible in public.
I love that. It makes me really happy to make people cry. So I love like seeing the reaction. And with Nothing More, it's really funny because the energy is so different than after. Like it's much happier. I mean, there's still a little hint of like sadness, but then with Nothing Less, like it's like halfway done, and then the rest of it is just like insane. So if you're thinking that it's going to be like this really cute little calm thing, it's not.
No.
Get ready for like craziness.
There you go, guys. Okay, you're not going to like this question because I know you love social media, but if you only had to choose one, which would it be? Instagram, Twitter, or Snapchat? I'm not going to make her go offline, guys. It's just a question. It's hard, I know.
I would say Twitter. I love Snapchat the most, but Twitter's so much easier to interact with people. Like Snapchat, when I first made my first Snapchat, I was accepting every person that sent the thing, but then every time I would open it, it would crash. And I'm like, what's wrong with my phone? I don't understand. But it was just because the traffic was too many. So I love Snapchat to be able to share like with you guys what I'm doing, but I can't interact that much. So it's like, but Twitter, I would literally rather like eat my own arm than get off of Twitter.
There you go. That's a promise from her. Okay. So your journey has been amazing, from writing on Wattpad, from being a fan to having so many fans to becoming an internationally successful author. What was that like for you? How crazy was it?
Well, it's still pretty crazy. When I started writing, I literally only was writing as a fan. I read a ton of fan fiction, and I kind of felt like there was something missing. Like, I don't know what it was. The stories were great, so it's not like it's the writer's fault, but I felt like, I don't know, just something was missing. So one day I'm like, well, all of these other people are writing, like the stories that I love to read. One of them was written by a 16-year-old, one like, it's like really young people with amazing stories. And then my favorite ones weren't updating at the time because everyone on Wattpad usually has like job and school and all these things. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I didn't want to read any like published books. I just wanted to read on Wattpad. And I only wanted to read fan fiction. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I wrote my first chapter just thinking like, oh, I'm just going to entertain myself. Like, I don't have anything else to do and I can't read anything else. And then I wrote the first chapter and I felt like relief. Like sometimes writers say like they felt scared after they wrote the first chapter, but I was the exact opposite. Like I was like, oh, that felt so good.
That's awesome.
And I just kept going and going, and it totally changed my idea of what a writer is supposed to be. Because even when I got offered the publishing deal, I still felt like, well, I'm not a real writer. And some people say that about like fan fiction and stuff, but then I'm like, I wrote a book, I'm a writer. Like even if it's not published, like if you finish a story, you're a writer. It doesn't matter anything else.
So we know that Hardin was inspired by Harry Styles and all the punk fan art that was coming out around the time you started. But who inspired Tessa?
Well, Tessa's supposed to be every one of us.
Okay.
So before I wrote After, I wrote an Imagine on
Yes.
Instagram. But now looking back, it definitely wasn't really an Imagine. It was like a
This was the
full-on fan
Starbucks.
fiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was awful. It was so awful. But it was about a girl who, well, it was you. It was all written as an Imagine. So like you walk into Starbucks, of course, and then you meet Harry Styles, of course. And then like 2 months later, you're married, of course, and you're like all these things. So it was totally like, sometimes I'm glad I deleted it. And then other times I'm like, oh, I should have saved it just for like, so I could laugh at myself later on. But I was writing that, but I still didn't think about like that I was writing a book. So then when I started writing, what was the question?
Tessa.
Tessa, okay.
We love it. Keep
So-
going.
So then when I started writing, I didn't have a really clear idea on who either of them were personality-wise, because in AU or like alternate universe fan fiction, it's never their actual personality.
Yeah.
And as sad as it is, like I don't know Harry Styles. So like, and the whole point wasn't to write a biography about him or write anything actually about him, just as inspiration for a character. And then Tessa, she just was like, I pictured this, she was really blank. Like before I realized that on Wattpad you can cast people beside One Direction, which wasn't even a thought in my head. I had this blank idea of her, and I wanted everyone to somewhat be able to relate to her. I wanted her to be smart, and sometimes in books, especially with such a domineering character like Hardin, where he has no social cues or any, like, no idea how to actually behave. The girl, it doesn't really talk too much about, like, her intelligence or, like, the things that she likes. So I wanted it to be relatable where when you're reading it, you feel like you're experiencing everything that she's experiencing. So far, at least it seems that people have been able to connect with her, but I didn't really have a clear idea of like who she was or what she was going to be like. I just only thought like in this first chapter, she's going to go to college, and that was it.
But eventually, did you find parts of yourself in her?
Yeah, well, all of the characters have parts of myself. I would even maybe say there's more of me in Hardin than Tessa.
Wow,
I
that's
think.
interesting.
I mean, I don't have like, I'm way more calm than Hardin. Like I don't have the
Don't beat up
temper.
people everywhere.
Yeah. But I have the same sense of humor, and you know, my experience with my family and things were a lot like his, opposed to Tessa. So I feel like all of my characters have something. I think Landon is the one who, like, sometimes when I'm reading the chapter, I'm like, oh, that's like me in a male body.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, I feel like every character has some of me, but Tessa has probably less than
Less.
Hardin, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I know that you used to write a lot, like I think most of it on your phone, right? Do you still do that?
No.
Because that would be crazy.
Yeah, well, once I got an editor and I started going through the chapters to edit them, I realized, like, I mean, even now I have a ton of typos, and grammar is totally not my thing, and I don't know if I'm failing as a writer by this, but I don't care
That's
about
why they're
grammar.
editors.
Like, exactly. So I'm not one of the writers who, like, goes over and makes sure my grammar is impeccable. Like, I don't care. I'd rather tell a story than worry about, like, where a comma goes. So I feel like, what was the question?
So you've moved to writing on your
Yes,
computer
yeah.
now.
So back to that. So I write on my computer, but I do take a lot of notes on my phone. Like, I take an enormous amount of notes. I usually, like, steal people's conversations. Like if there's like a really annoying person in a bar or something, I like write down everything they're saying, and then it doesn't end up exactly the same in the book, but like some of the annoyingness stays. So I don't write on my phone
anymore. But do you have any other writing rituals? Like, or is there a special time of the day where you usually write, like writing more, or any special fonts that you use? Or
not really. I like to write in the morning just because when I update on Wattpad, then like almost everyone is awake, so it makes it more fun because then the comments are like faster. But I don't really have like a time, and especially now because I'm traveling so much, it's like impossible to make an actual schedule. And I never want to get to where I feel like I have to write at this time or this time, because then it's going to feel like a job, and like nobody wants that.
Yeah. When did you realize that a lot of people were reading your work? When was that moment where like, oh my God, this is something?
I saw the numbers climbing, of course, on Wattpad, but it wasn't really the same until I saw, when I went to make my Twitter account, I was like on After 2, and I don't remember how many reads, but I know I had like a couple million of reads, which is a lot, of course, but when I made my Twitter, my username was taken, and I was like, who would want like imaginary 1D? Like, what is, like, why would you take that?
Which is why you have an X on yours.
Yeah, that's why my Twitter is the only place with an X. And the girl, I wasn't gonna ask the person to like give me the username, so I just put the X there. But then when I made my Twitter account, I saw when you make it, it shows like who to follow. So there were all of these accounts that were like, after Harry and after Tessa and like Harry's car and all of these things, and I was like, what is that? And then I clicked on them, and they were people like role playing. And I feel like as a fan of stuff, like that's when it's real.
Awesome.
Like numbers are one thing. Like I'm really happy with, you know, obviously all the reads and stuff, but to have people passionate enough to want to live in the characters on social media is like a whole other world.
Oh yeah.
So that's when I like knew that people liked it. Yeah.
Awesome. Can you tell us more about Imagines? Have you guys read Imagines? Yes. You need to buy your copies outside. What? Oh my God. Okay, Tessa. No, sorry, Anna. I called you Tessa. Can you tell us more about Imagines? How did this project come about?
Well, it started as sort of a like hypothetical, me kind of joking but hoping that it would be serious thing, where I always love writing fan fiction. Like I'm never going to not love fan fiction. I'll probably write fan fiction like for the rest of my existence. So I was talking to my editor. I don't even remember where we were or what we were doing, but somehow it came up about like, I'm like, it would be so cool if we could do a whole book of like fan fiction. Yeah. And then both of it, he's like, oh, that would be awesome. But like, that doesn't mean that a publisher, especially such a big publisher, is going to be like, oh, totally, let's write fan fiction. And like a bunch of authors who aren't published and all these things. So then a few months later, my editor, we were on a call like about something, probably me being late on my deadline or whatever it was. So then he said, you know, I've been talking to Wattpad, and I think that we're going to do a couple of projects together. And I think one of them is going to be that, like a fan fiction book. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And my favorite part about Imagines, not only is it cool because it's fan fiction, but there are 30 other Wattpad writers who have never been published. They are, you know, like the young, well, not all of them are young, but I mean like young in like spirit. Yeah. There are these amazing people who write for the love of writing, and I feel like the publishing world could use a little more of that. And it makes me really, really happy that, not necessarily because of me, but because of my readers, then through me, like this whole chain, that all of these people got to write a story and be in stores and have a publishing deal for the first time. And it's already sparked, I can't say who or anything, but it's already sparked a few of them being offered publishing deals and getting so agents and all of these things. But my stories in Imagines are, one is with Kylie Jenner, which obviously she's pretty controversial, but at the end of the day, she's a young girl with a crazy, crazy life. And I feel like when you're put in that world when you're so young and everyone around you is so, you know, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Everyone around you is so into this beautiful, like being beautiful. Yeah. And that's really the only way that they have careers. I mean, they obviously work their butts off. Like they have all these businesses and stuff, but Kylie, I feel like she's the youngest. She's the one who gets tormented online every single day.
Yeah.
So whether you think she's fake or she's this or that, like she's a young girl who really doesn't need to be bullied all day, every day. And that drives me absolutely crazy. So I saw this video on YouTube before this, like 6 months before I even considered writing about her. And it was a video of her getting her makeup done. But in the background was this man's voice reading all of these terrible, like disgusting things that people say to her all the time. Even if you search her name on Twitter, like the stuff you read is like disgusting. So if, I don't know, I feel like some weird like protective thing for her. I don't know why, but maybe because we're going to be friends or something. I don't know. But,
It's going to happen. Yeah.
like somebody, hopefully. But I just like, I don't know, I feel some weird like duty to like tell people to stop being jerks to her. I don't know why, but yeah, so when I wrote the story, when I first told my readers like, oh, I'm writing this Kylie Jenner thing, most of them were like, oh, like, okay. And I'm like, that's exactly why I'm writing it. So I'm not saying like become her biggest fan or buy her makeup or whatever, but I think that if you replace her name with any other young celebrity, it kind of has the same thing. Like there's still people, and this is her whole life has been, I always go in this huge long rant about Kylie Jenner. So this has been her life, and like, let's just try to make it a little easier. But then the other one, people liked more because it was Daniel Sharman, who hypothetically is my choice for Hardin.
Oh, I was going to ask about that.
I'm like trying to think of how to word it. So I wanted to write about him, one, because he's an amazing person. I just like really enjoy him as a human. And two, because a lot of my readers like have crushes on him and all these things. But when I was writing it, I wanted to make it more about him as a person instead of, you know, like Isaac from Teen Wolf, so I didn't mention anything that he's ever been in, but it was a really weird experience because I've never written fan fiction about someone that I know. So then when I was writing it, I was like, maybe I should tell him, because we're kind of at that point where like we know each other and we've been around each other quite a few times, so I'm like, maybe I should like mention this. So then I text him and I'm like, so I'm writing this thing, do you know what Imagine is? And he's like, no, what's that? And I'm like, well, let me tell you. So I explained it. I mean, of course he knows what fan fiction is, everyone does, but I'm like, so I'm writing this thing, and you know, do you mind if I write this, it's going to be published? And he was totally on board, and he gave me like all these things to include, and like when I
cool.
sent it to him first, and then he texted me and he's like, is this how girls think about me? And I'm like, like, well, I'm not saying yes, but I'm not saying no. So it was a really cool, but it was a little strange, like writing about someone you know. Yeah, so hopefully you guys like it.
So see, you guys need to read that book. What do you love about fan fiction? And do you still have time to enjoy it? Like, do you still get the chance to read it? You're so busy now.
I still read it. Right now I'm like so obsessed with The Bronze Horseman, I'm not reading anything else, but I'm almost done with book 2. Like that's why today I was like a little late coming down because I kept reading. And I was like, I kept telling myself when Ursula comes back to the room, that's when I'll stop reading. But then her panel took longer, and I'm like, oh, well, it's like fate, because when she comes, that's when I'll stop. And then it was like 5 minutes till we had to leave, and I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, I love fan fiction, and I always want to read it. I always want to write it. I love the fact that people who love something, like, you know, when I read Twilight, I loved it so much. Like, I was so obsessed with it, but I wasn't online. Like, I wasn't in the fandom necessarily. I didn't have Twitter. I didn't have anything. I had a Facebook, but I don't even think I knew how to use it. So I was totally, when I read books, I didn't realize that all of these other people were reading them and talking about them online and making fan art and all these things. And then when I finished Midnight Sun, the part of it that's online for like the 15th time, I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I need to read something else with these characters. Like, I don't want to leave them. I love them. And then I typed in, like, I think I typed in something like stories like Twilight or stories about Twilight or something. And then I was like, oh my God, there's all of this stuff on this website. I think it was like fanfic.net or fanfiction.net or something. And then I just was a zombie. And I had like an old desktop computer, so I just like sat at it just scrolling all day. But anyway, back to the point of like, I didn't want to leave the characters, and I wanted to stay in that world. And I love the idea that whether it's a book or it's people, you get to like spend more time with them. Like, not all One Direction fan fiction is like, where they're in a band or they're this. It's just like taking things you already love and building on them and staying in that world longer. Like, especially now with this whole like break thing, it's like, well, at least we have fan fiction.
Yeah. So true. Okay, speaking of fan art and tributes, do you have a favorite HESA fan art or fan tribute?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a few, but the first one that came to my mind is a video. I think it's on After 3 on Wattpad. One of them, it's like when Wattpad first introduced YouTube links to the thing, feels like so long ago. But it's a video that when I watched it, I literally had to like remind myself, like, she doesn't know Harry, like they've never met each other, like, but it was so amazing, and it took this girl so long to do, and it just blew my mind. Like, there was a part where Tessa opens the drawer and like pulls out a picture frame, and there's literally like a manip inside the picture frame, and I was like, how is that? Like, I don't understand how she did that. So I just love that video. I would love if someone could like recreate that with Daniel. That would be I would die. So if anybody's good at that.
There you go,
send it
guys.
to me.
Make videos. What's the craziest thing a fan has done to get your attention?
Oh. Well, I don't know. I don't really want to. Well, the one that is the craziest I don't want to say, just because I really like her as a person, and I don't want to embarrass her because I know that she'll know like that it's her. And she really is sweet, and but it was a little like, I'm like, oh, okay, this takes up to a whole other level. But I don't know. I would just say like, no, I don't know. There's really not. Beside that, there hasn't been anything really crazy. But it's all like fun for me. Like, I don't know what the level would be that it would be like crazy. Yeah. Because like, I mean, if I had access to like get Cassandra Clare's attention, I'd be crazy as hell. So I don't know like what the level is.
What's your favorite thing that people say about your books?
My favorite thing is when they say that they read more now. That's my favorite part of it. And when they write, of course, that's like amazing.
We were very excited when we heard that that After has been optioned for film. Do you have any updates?
Well, I have an update, but I'm not allowed to say exactly what it is.
So you better keep following her online.
But I can say, well, I'm trying to think what I can say. I can say like a couple little things that most of you probably maybe know. But Susan McMartin, of course, is writing the screenplay, and she already finished it, so now she's working on the second, which is really cool because usually, you have to wait for a year, and then they start writing it. With this, like, they're like, let's do them all, like, back to back, which never really happens, especially with 4 of them. But we're trying to figure out now, well, I guess we kind of figured it out, but we were trying to figure out how to make this different. Like, there's all these amazing franchises like The Hunger Games and Harry Potter and all these things and Twilight, but when you wait a year between each movie, it kind of gets like, it takes a really long time. And when you have something that doesn't really have any fantasy elements or like world building necessarily, 4 movies, waiting a year in between, like, I don't even think I would be interested by the last one. So we're trying to do something much faster.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
Which I think is a really good idea. And honestly, I can't even remember the last time I went to the movie theater. Like, I just don't remember it. I don't remember. I think it was like 50 Shades, I think, or something.
Whoa, that was a while ago.
It was a long time ago. So unless it's something that I really, really want to see, I'm not, and I don't really watch like any of the superhero movies or anything, and I think that's what really draws people to movie theaters. And I feel like with technology and with my story coming from the internet, like, why not do something much faster and save all that time and all that energy? But yeah, that's kind of all I can say. But just keep watching and like following Susan's videos that she puts and stuff, because hopefully soon we'll have something like that's awesome, more exciting.
So we know who you want Hardin to be, but who's your dream Tessa?
Indiana Evans. Yeah. Yeah. I've wanted.
They're happy about it.
Since Wattpad, and I think I'm allowed to say that she knows that, and she's very happy about it. So
awesome. So we know what's coming next. Nothing more, nothing less for the Landon lovers here. Can you tell us about that, and can you tell us what else is coming up for you?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't remember when now, like maybe 2 years ago, actually probably longer. Oh, it's so weird. When I was still updating After, I think it was like after 3, I had put it in the author's note, like I'm gonna write a book about Landon next. But then I didn't know I was gonna like get a publishing deal and all these things and like travel and be a lot busier than I was. So I had planned to write the story right after I finished, after 3, and my hair is falling out. So I had this idea of Hardin and Tessa. Hopefully everybody's read the books, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If you haven't, then like I'm gonna spoil something. So at the end, they kind of reunite at Landon's wedding, and that scene was like stuck in my head, but I didn't, like his wife didn't have a face. Like I literally like I didn't know who she was. I'm like, why? And it felt like I was like ruining it by just picking someone. Like I felt like I had to have more thought. Like I love Landon so much, and I'm like, I want to know how he figured out who he's gonna marry and who she is. And after he had Dakota, or Delilah, Hardin says, but Dakota, but I didn't know for sure if that's who he would end up with. And then there was like Nora/Sophia and all these things in my head, and I'm like, I really want to figure out who she is, but I don't want to skip and just like pick somebody. And then I started writing it kind of like How I Met Your Mother-ish, like you go back in time and figure out who it is. But I'm like halfway, a little over halfway done with Nothing Less. And I still am like going back and forth on who it is. So I don't know. But when I'm writing, I'm still live updating. So like I just updated like 2 days ago, and I just wrote that. Like the chapter that I am finishing. Hopefully, well, tomorrow for sure on my flight, I'll be updating then. So like I don't know what's going to happen. Well, I kind of do, but they're all crazy, so I don't know.
Excited. And some of you are going to get the chance to read Nothing More before any of us. 5 of you will be bringing home the book today. You'll find out in a very short while. But I have another question. Is there a possibility of more spin-offs? Are there any other characters that you want to write books about?
Yeah. I don't have anything like 100% or anything like that. But I feel like I could write, me and Ursula were talking about this like last week about that thing where people have, even to me, they've said like, is she gonna write anything else? Like, why is she still in this world? And I'm like, I've made this world and I can stay in it as long as I freaking want to.
It's gonna be hard to say goodbye to that
It's a weird
world.
idea that like people say like you should leave. Like of course if I felt like I didn't have anything else left, I wouldn't force it. But I feel like there's so many characters and so much happening. Even with Hardin and Tessa, like they're still always on my mind. Like I literally miss them every day. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I'm allowed to say again. I hate
that means there's something.
But I have some things that I've already written before. I can't say like what I'm going to do with them or anything. I could totally tell you guys so much more if phones weren't a thing. But
hide your phones.
I have been writing a lot of things, like even on holidays, like I'll be like, I wonder what Hardin and Tessa are doing. Like, I wonder what they're doing. And then I would write it. And then other characters as well, like the whole thing with Christian and Ken and Hardin's mom is always in my mind. And Zed, of course, I'm like, I love him. Everybody either loves him or hates him, but
I love him too.
I love him too. Like he drove me crazy, and I don't want him and Tessa like anywhere near each other, but I still like him as a person. So we'll see.
Okay, do you have any advice for aspiring authors in the audience?
Yeah. Well, everyone obviously has different paths, and like I feel like I wish there was some like magic formula where it would just immediately be success and everything would be great. But sadly, that's not true. But I do really strongly believe that if you want to be a writer, if that's what you want to do, it is totally possible, especially with stuff like Wattpad. Like my entire life, even though I loved books, I loved reading since I can remember, I never once ever thought that I could actually be a writer. Like the idea was such a distant, crazy thing. Like to be a writer, you have to be a college graduate. You have to have all these degrees in creative writing, and you have to take workshops, and you have to like have this crazy extensive vocabulary and know where commas go and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized that's totally not true. But I would say to use something like Wattpad, if that's what you're interested in. The idea of the old-fashioned like querying to publishers, which I didn't even know what that even meant until like 6 months after I was published. But I think that hopefully at least is slowly fading out. Like the idea of this one person sitting in an office in New York somewhere, well, I'm speaking like US, of course, in New York somewhere, picking what we read is like such a weird thought. And I'm like, luckily my editor is really cool and he buys cool books, but what about the editors that they just don't like that? Like I've had a friend who wrote a really amazing story, and when she got an agent, her agent told her, you know, your book would be better if your character was 2 years older, and if she had darker hair, and if she was this, and if she, and I'm like, well, that's not your book anymore. And so it's a weird thing, and especially because when, not that I like hate the publishing world, because I love my publisher and I'm so glad I went with them, but if you're trying to change the whole story, like you're kind of taking away from that. And if you're, a lot of times when they find new writers and they tell them, if you change this and change this, of course they're going to do it because they're so happy to be published. And I think that's so unfair that that happens. So with Wattpad, like if I would have sent in my manuscript, which I again had no idea, I thought that was like a movie or something. I'm like, what the heck is a manuscript? So if I would have sent in my draft of After to Simon & Schuster or to any of the other publishers that wanted it, there's no way they would have published it. Like they probably would have read 3 pages and been like, oh, good girl, bad boy, college, we did this a million times. But since I had an audience, even if my audience would have been a lot smaller than it is, it totally gave me an advantage. And I feel like, well, now I know someone who, she has like 2,000 reads, and she just got an agent. So
That's awesome.
it's, Wattpad's totally opening the doors. And I would say if you are using Wattpad to update a lot, I think that there are a couple of things that made After successful. Like some of them I'm not sure what they are yet, but some of the things that I do know was that I was updating all the time. Most of the story was like every day I was updating, which obviously takes a lot of time and commitment, but if it's something you really want to do, just make the time. And even if you pre-write it and then update chapter by chapter, I would say to not be afraid to post it. Like, and with the internet, you can have a different name. You can, I mean, I had a screen name only for like 2 years. No one even knew my name or anything. So I would just say to not doubt yourself and just have fun doing it and remember why you started doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. And at this point, we would like to invite members of the audience to ask questions. How do we choose, JB? Okay, there you go.
Hi, my name's Samantha. If you'd be able to meet Harry Styles, would you ever tell him about your book?
Well, he already knows about it, so I don't think I'd have to tell him. But I don't know, it's a weird thing with One Direction as a whole, because I feel like since they have been such a part of my life, like not only as a fan, but just as like literally like my entire career is because I wrote fan fiction about them. I sort of have this idea of who they are and how they are and how it would be if I met them. And I've thought about this like a million times, even before I ever got published or anything. I used to think like all of these things that I would say to him if I met him. And then I would like want his iPod playlist and all these things. But now I think looking back, like I don't really think I want to meet any of them, because if I met them, it would be like, obviously it'd be really fast, and it would be like, I don't know, I wish I would have met him at like a coffee shop like 5 years ago or something. But now if I met him, or any of them, not just him, I would love to meet all of them. But in reality, I don't want the idea of who they are to be ruined. And even someone I know who met Harry for like 2 seconds, not that she wasn't happy, like she was crying and stuff, but then afterwards she's like, it kind of sucks because he doesn't know who I am at all. Like it was like a 2-second thing and then it was done, and for her it was like this whole thing. But I don't know, it's a weird thing with fans. Like I probably sound psychotic, but it's like a weird thing. Like you want to meet them, but then if you do and then it's disappointing, like my whole life is like, I don't know who I am now.
Any other questions? There you go.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and
Hi, my name is Patricia, and I'm so sorry, but you inspired me to write fan fictions on Wattpad. But in spite of having Harry and Tessa in your book, do you think Larry is real?
This always happens.
Larry is real, guys! Larry is real!
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I learned my lesson not to give like a direct answer to this, but I am pretty neutral on the whole thing. Like I don't know, none of us actually know what they're doing, and I feel like there's a level and a boundary that we need to stay behind. Like I think forcing things or like harassing family members or girlfriends, or even if you don't think they're their girlfriends, like I don't understand this need to like harass people. And that's just like from outside looking in, that's a lot of what I see all the time, which I know isn't the whole case, but the like mean people are just a lot louder than the nice ones. So I don't really know, like none of us know what the heck is going on or happening, but I want to always be respectful to them, and they're humans. They're not like our little puppets that we can torture and like make fun of and send hate to their families and their girlfriends and their baby and all of these things. But I will say that I've read a ton of Larry fan fiction. So it's not that I'm against it, but that's none of my business, like what they're doing. I don't want to ever like say what they're doing in their personal life. I just want them all to be happy, whether they're together or they're not, or if like, you know, Louis and Niall are together. Like, I just want them to be happy, and I don't feel like it's my place to talk about what they're doing in their personal life.
Questions?
Okay. Hello. Hi, Anna. So I am I was so inspired by After, and because of that, I started writing fan fictions. And also, I have some trouble with me writing fan fictions because at some point, I don't know what the plot twists are. Because sometimes when you make drafts, you're just like, I don't know what's gonna happen with Harry, or I don't know what's gonna happen with Louis, or with the girl with Harry. But I just want to know, how do you make those plot twists? Like, how do you came up with the plot twist that comes in the right time? And another, I want to ask, how do you make the characters fit in the right place? Because sometimes there's fan fictions that, for example, Niall dies, or Niall has amnesia, or he always eats Nando's, and then after that, she doesn't update anymore. How do you make the story at the right place, at the right time, and the characters at the right fit in their personality?
Well, with After, it was easier, but with the one that I wrote on Instagram, it was like the most stereotypical thing ever. Like, Niall was always hungry, and all these, like, and Louis was hyper, like all these really like things like early fandom days. But with After, I just separated it. Like, I didn't think of them as One Direction, as like their actual selves at all. I just thought about the characters and who I wanted them to be as like their new selves. I think that makes it a lot easier if you just completely put a wall between what they are and what you want them to be. And with, what was the first part? Oh, plot twists. Okay, yeah. Sorry. With the plot twists, most of them I didn't really know like they were gonna happen. So with the one in the first book, well, I'm just gonna spoil it because everyone said you read it. So with the bet, for example, in about 20-something chapters in, I felt like I loved writing the story, but it was like the same as all these other like good girl, bad boy stories, and I wanted it to be different. And I love darker characters. Like, I love Damon Salvatore and Chuck Bass and Heathcliff, and I love like really complex characters. So I wanted Hardin to be, or Harry at the time, to be that, but his own person. So I thought, like, how can I make him worse than Heathcliff, but not like eating people like Damon? So I was thinking, like, what could he do that would be like so bad but necessary, not just to make it like, oh, it's a shocking thing. I wanted it to be something that would fit realistically in the story, but also be painful and make you question whether you think they should be together. I didn't want it to be a story where from the beginning you know they're going to end up together and everything's going to be happy. And I don't really like to read really happy romances. I like to be tortured until the end. So I kind of wanted to do that. And with the other plot twists, like with Hardin's dad not being kin, that came pretty early, like even before anything like Steph or any of those plot twists came. It was a conversation they were having in Christian's office, and it's something like the way, when I write, I like picture what's happening, like the scene. I don't think about the fact that I'm writing it. I just like, kind of like I'm watching a movie or something. So I pictured the way Christian was looking at him, and their eyes were like the same. And I was like, oh my God, he's his freaking dad. And then I was like, what in the world? Like, and then once I thought about that, there's no way I could go back to Ken being the dad because I knew he wasn't. And I'm like, how did I not know this? Like, I don't understand. Like, why did they do that? And how did this happen? So then on Wattpad, I had already put, I think it was that Christian's eyes in the beginning were blue. So then I remember I was like, oh, I have to go back and find that chapter and change it now that I know that he doesn't have blue eyes and he's not just like the friend. So that plot twist was the one that really I was like, oh my God, this changes the entire story. It changes the dynamic with the family and with after I wanted it to be a whole world. I didn't want it to just be the couple. I wanted it to be like the friends and the family, especially after the first book, like you really spend a lot of time with them. So that plot twist, I didn't know what the heck was going on. But I feel like that's usually how it is. And with Steph, I felt like the same way. Like I didn't like her. I liked her and she was fun, but something about her like irritated me. But I had no reason to not like her. She was like really helping Tessa and, you know, making Tessa step out of her comfort zone and stuff. So when she started becoming like more and more evil and the whole thing with like Dan and stuff, it just like happened when I was writing it. And I was like, okay, like I hate you now. But then when I went back, when we were editing the story, it was really interesting to me to see how in the beginning I had always put hints in there without realizing I was doing it. So if I were you, I would just try, I'm not sure if it'll work because every writer has a totally different process, but I would just try to forget that you are in control and let the characters do what they want. And then if you're a writer, unlike me, who goes back and edits stuff, then you can refine it and try to like make it a little more like twisty. But I find that usually the books that have the best plot twists are always like more organic. But it's easier said than done, of course, because we want to question everything we're doing. But I would just try to like shut your brain off and let the characters do whatever they want to do.
Okay, more questions?
Hi, Anna. My name is Kim Shelley, and this is my question. Many people underestimate Wattpad writers, especially fan fiction writers, because we're not as original as, let's say, chick lit or maybe teen fiction. But what can you say about this? Do we get the credit that we should get, or are we just put on the back end?
Well, my answer to this would be, like 2 years ago, if you would have asked me that, I would have been like, oh, we totally get brushed off, and like everybody thinks fan fiction is this and this and this. And even myself as a young writer who, I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm not young at all, but to be a writer and to have, you know, 6, gonna be 8 books, I'm really young to be that far in a career. And in the beginning, there was a lot of like, not necessarily to me, but of course in like the background of things like, oh, she's so young, or I would get that like, oh, you're so lucky and you're so young and you skipped the whole hard part of writing. And I'm like, I wrote 1 million words. I didn't skip anything, but I felt like I didn't deserve it, or I felt like I'm not a real writer for a really long time. Even after my book was out, I remember like being at signings and being like, why the heck am I even here with all these like writers? But then when I started reading more and more of these people's books that I was around and the ones in the same genre as me, I realized that every single writer, whether they admit it or not, draw inspiration from something. There's always something that they're drawing inspiration from, whether they want to say it's fan fiction or not. Even I had like an epiphany about one of the other authors who was here. One of the 3, oh, that's just me, never mind. I was gonna point. Yeah, Paula McLain. So with her, I would have never considered her book fan fiction or anything like that. But then listening to her talk about how she read Hemingway, Hardin loves Hemingway too. So when she read Hemingway's story, or like biography basically, she became fascinated with his first wife. So then she wrote a story, a fictionalized story about his first wife, and I'm like, wait, so you wrote Hemingway fan fiction, but no one would ever say that because, you know, she's won awards and all these things. But I'm like, hey, every one of us is writing some kind of fan fiction. Even fantasy books, you find like similarities between all these things. So back to the whole question, is that I would not think about that at all, because it's, one, if you're writing a book, you're a writer, it doesn't matter what you're writing, and 2, thanks to Wattpad, and it's so awesome for, like, I'll go off for a second, it's so awesome the way that Wattpad is so loved here, like, I love that, but I've seen just from, like, a bird's eye view of the transition of people, like, not really thinking of fan fiction that same way. And for me, I had like all these things against me. Like 1, I'm not a trained writer. 2, I didn't graduate college. 3, I don't ever want to go back to college. I have no intention of doing that whatsoever. I wrote romance. I wrote erotic romance. I wrote One Direction fan fiction. Like there were all these things, but now it's like, who cares? Like it doesn't matter. And if anyone is going to spend enough time like caring enough about what you're doing to say something negative, then I would just like kind of feel sorry for them, because obviously like they should just write their own book. And I would just say, like, you know, I don't know. I said this in an interview. Well, I said it a lot now, but the first time I said it, the journalist was like really offended by this. But when he was saying, he's a person who like fan fiction is totally not anything he'd ever read and or respect in any way. But after the conversation, it was really cool because he's like, you know, I had every intention of like he didn't say exactly this, but basically he had every intention of making me look like a complete idiot. But then after the conversation, he really, really liked me as a person, and he loved my like I'm not sorry for writing fan fiction. I'm never going to be embarrassed about liking One Direction. Like, I don't care. If you don't like it, don't read it. But I told him, because he said, well, you know, I think that fan fiction is, I forget how he worded it, basically like unoriginal or whatever. And I was like, well, lucky for you, there's a million other books you can read. And then he's like, okay. But that's like, if anyone says anything, they just say like, well, that's great. Like, just read another book.
More questions? One last question. Sorry, guys. You can ask her a question when you're having her sign your book.
Hi, Anna. First of all, thank you for coming here, and thank you for writing after, and just thank you for being you. Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, since After's a One Direction fan fiction, do you plan to write another fan fiction with other boy bands or other celebrities as characters?
Well, I don't really, One Direction's really like the only boy band I think I like really love. And when I loved like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and stuff, I was really young. So I don't really want to write them right now. Yeah, they're a little like, they're obviously not old, but like that phase of my life is past. So I don't think like boy bands necessarily, but I have this like kind of, I don't know if it's like an obsession or if I'm like just like in love with him or what it is, but do you guys know who Miles Teller is? Yeah. So I love him. Like I like feel like, I mean, I'm married obviously, so like whatever, but I love him. And I just think he's so fascinating as a person and as an actor. Like he's so talented, and I feel like he's so underestimated. And it's so weird. Like I read this interview that he did where he said, the first 5 years of him trying to be an actor, every single person, including his agent, told him, you're not cute enough to be a main character. It's never going to happen. Like, you're never going to be a love interest. You need to start focusing on doing things that are like, you know, timepieces or things that aren't about you, basically. But then Whiplash came out, and I watched that movie, and I'd already liked him from Divergent, and like, I thought he was cute, and you know, but then I went back and watched every movie he's ever been in, whether he was a small character or not, and he is just so fascinating. And reading interviews, like if any of you are bored or whatever, just read interviews that he's done, because he is like, he's the perfect, I don't know, he doesn't care about what people think of him. He doesn't care if he's going to offend people, which not that you shouldn't care, because you should be respectful all the time, but he does it in a way that he's not rude. He just, if you don't like him, he doesn't care, and he has opinions. And he's really smart and passionate, and I think that he should go back and like give a copy of Whiplash to all of the people that said that. And then he did a movie called The Spectacular Now. I don't know if anyone has seen it. Yeah, and that movie, I'm like, see, he can totally play love interest. So my next thing, I don't think I've said this publicly yet. I don't know if
You guys are hearing it for the
So
first
here we go. I'm already going there. But I'm not going to tell you what exactly it is. But the main character is, in my mind, looks exactly like him, has the same attitude in real life that he has, but the story is totally not about him. Like in reality, it's kind of like after, like obviously it's not about Harry, but it looks like Harry, so.
Can't wait to read that. That's awesome. Okay, and now we're gonna find out who the first readers of Nothing More will be in this room. I have 5 lucky people. Check your signing numbers. Number 16. If you're number 16, you get a copy of Nothing More. Where's number 16? Okay, claim it after the program. Just go to the front. Okay, number 43. 43, are you here? Yes, there you are. Number 98. You guys sound so sad. You're gonna read it in a few weeks as well. It's coming out in September,
on
right?
Wattpad still, if it makes you feel better. You
And
can
they
read-
are Wattpad, guys.
I mean, the published one has a little more, but still.
So you can start reading on Wattpad and then grab the book as soon as it comes out. 98, are you here? Oh, it's 2 guys now and 1 girl. 102. Don't hate me, I didn't pick the numbers.
Me either.
102. It's another guy. 3 guys. 117. That's the last number. Maybe try bribing the guys. I don't know. 117. That's the last number there. 2 girls and 3 guys. Okay. So claim your copies here in front later after the program. Before we proceed to the book signing, which everyone's excited for, do you have a message for everyone here today?
Just thank you guys for, well, one, for spending your day here. Well, I guess there's no traffic today, right? 'Cause Sunday, yeah. But either way, for spending your time coming here and spending your money on my books and spending your time reading them and tweeting me and loving the characters as much as I do. And I'm really happy to be here finally. And I plan on coming back really sooner than I thought, actually.
Yay! So you, for sure, awesome. Okay, we can't wait for that.